The line of grain trucks stretched 2 miles back from the elevator. It was October 1983, and corn was trading at $2.14 a bushel. 6 months earlier, it had been $3.40. The bank wanted cash flow. The elevator wanted volume. Everyone wanted out. Davis sat in his truck, fourth in line, watching farmers unload. The Hendersons had just dumped 8,000 bushels. The Carsons were backing up to the pit now. Miller was behind Davis with another full load. They were all selling. Every truck in that line was carrying the same calculation. Sell now at a loss or risk foreclosure by Christmas. The interest rate on farm loans was sitting at 18%. Prime rate had hit 21% the year before. Land values were collapsing. Every farmer in that line was leveraged. They owed money on land they'd bought at peak prices. They owed money on equipment they'd financed when grain was $4 a bushel. The math didn't work anymore. It hadn't worked in months. Davis reached the scale. The elevator manager walked out. "You unloading today?" "Just checking the line. We're taking everything we can get. Price might drop again tomorrow." Davis nodded, pulled out of line, drove home. Behind him, the trucks kept unloading. The price kept falling. The farm crisis had started quietly. Interest rates rose. Inflation cooled. Export demand softened. Then grain prices collapsed. What had been a slow bleed became a hemorrhage. By 1983, the Midwest was watching farms go under at a rate not seen since the Depression. The pressure was simple. Debt service required cash flow. Cash flow required selling grain, but selling grain at $2.14 when your break-even was $3. $20 meant every bushel sold was a bushel lost. The banks didn't care about break-even. They cared about payment schedules. Davis had 12,000 bushels in storage, 2 grain bins, both full. Corn dried to 15% moisture, properly aerated, sitting in steel bins his father had installed in 1961. The bins weren't fancy. No automated systems, no temperature cables, just perforated floors and a centrifugal fan powered by a 3-horsepower motor. He walked out to the bins that evening, checked the moisture meter. 15, 2%, still good. Opened the fan housing. The motor was warm but not hot. Bearings sounded smooth. The fan had been running since harvest, cycling air through the grain mass, preventing hot spots. Managing condensation. The electricity cost was $47 a month. His wife stood on the porch. "Everyone's selling?" "I know." The bank called again. "They want to see cash flow." "I know that too." "So what are we doing?" Davis looked at the bins. "Waiting." Selling wasn't stupidity. It was fear. Completely rational fear. The farmers dumping grain at $2.14 weren't panicking. They were calculating. They had debt service. They had families. They had equipment payments. Liquidity felt safer than storage, but Davis had something most of them didn't: paid off land and old equipment. His father had refused to expand during the boom years, hadn't bought the new acreage everyone else was buying, hadn't financed the big iron everyone said you needed, just kept farming the same 240 acres with machinery that worked. When Davis inherited the farm in 1979, it came with no debt, which meant in 1983, when everyone else was being crushed by leverage, Davis had something nobody else had: time. The fan kept running. November, corn dropped to $1. 1998, the elevator was crowded again. The Carsons sold another 5,000 bushels. The Mitchells liquidated their entire crop. Henderson came by Davis's place. "You still holding?" "Yeah." "Bank's not pressuring you?" "Not the same way they're pressuring you." Henderson looked at the bins. "How much grain you got in there?" 12,000 bushels. "That's $30,000 at today's price. You could pay off half your operating costs." "I could, but you're not." "Not yet." Henderson shook his head. "Prices aren't coming back. The whole export market's collapsed. Soviet Union's buying from Argentina. China's not buying at all. This is the new normal." "Maybe. You're gambling." Davis didn't argue, because Henderson was right. Holding grain was gambling. Every day the fan ran was a bet that prices would stabilize. Every night he checked moisture levels was a calculation against mold risk. Storage wasn't confidence, it was exposure. But selling was permanent. Once the grain was gone, the negotiating power was gone. Time was the only asset he had that wasn't depreciating. The fan kept running. December brought the first bin fire scare. Temperature probe showed a hot spot developing in the south bin. Davis was out there at 2 a.m., flashlight in hand, climbing the bin ladder. Opened the top hatch. The smell hit him immediately. Fermentation. The grain was heating. He fired up the fan, let it run continuous for 36 hours. Checked the temperature every 4 hours. The hot spot broke up. The moisture redistributed. Crisis avoided. His wife watched him come in at dawn. This is costing us money. The electricity? The risk. Every day we hold is another day something goes wrong. I know. The Hendersons sold out. The Carsons sold out. They're hurting, but they're done worrying about grain. They sold at a loss they can't recover from. And we're sitting on grain that might mold before prices come back. Davis poured coffee. Didn't argue. She was right. The difference between him and the Hendersons wasn't intelligence, it was circumstance. They had debt. He didn't. They needed liquidity. He needed patience. But patience had costs. Every kilowatt hour, every night spent checking bins, every temperature fluctuation that meant climbing ladders in freezing weather. The fan kept running. January 1984. Corn was at $2. Oto 5. Barely moved in 3 months. The elevator manager called. We've got space if you want to move grain. What's the price? $2.05 for number 2 yellow. I'll wait. Wait for what? This is the market. Export demand's gone. Government's not propping prices. This is what corn's worth now. Then I'll store it longer. Silence on the line. Then, how long you planning to wait? Until it makes sense to sell. That might never happen. Then I'll have expensive chicken feed. The manager laughed, not meanly, just tired. You're not the only one thinking that way, but most guys can't afford to think that way. They've got notes due. Davis knew. He saw it at the co-op, at the diner, at church. The farmers who'd expanded during the boom were being crushed. Land they'd bought at $4,000 an acre was worth $1,800 now. Equipment they'd financed was worth half the loan balance. The debt wasn't shrinking. The asset values were. Selling grain at a loss didn't fix the problem. It just delayed the reckoning. But delaying was all most farmers could do. Davis had the luxury of waiting because he didn't have the burden of debt. But that luxury came with constant doubt. What if Henderson was right? What if this was the new normal? What if prices never recovered? The fan kept running. February. The electricity bill was $53 higher because of the continuous run time during the hot spot scare. Davis sat at the kitchen table, calculator in hand. Cost of storage, $47 average per month. 4 months so far, $188. Opportunity cost, 12,000 bushels at $2. 05. That's $2,600 he didn't have in the bank. Risk cost, potential mold, potential spoilage, potential total loss. Against that, the possibility that prices would stabilize. The knowledge that everyone who'd already sold couldn't benefit from any recovery. The fact that he still had grain to negotiate with. It wasn't math. It was betting on time. His wife came in. Miller stopped by. His operations for sale. The whole thing? Everything. Land, equipment, grain bins. He's done. What happened? Same thing that's happening to everyone. He sold his crop in October at $214, thought he was being smart, getting liquid. Then his loan came due in December. The cash wasn't enough. Bank called the note. Davis knew Miller, good farmer, worked hard, made the logical decision to sell when everyone else was selling. But logic in a collapsing market just meant you collapsed in an orderly fashion. The difference between survival and foreclosure wasn't wisdom, it was leverage. Miller had it. Davis didn't. The fan kept running. March brought the first real break. Corn ticked up to $2.23. Not much. 18 cents. But movement. The elevator called. You seeing this? Seeing what? Price uptick, some export interest from Mexico. Chinese delegation touring Iowa. Might not mean anything, but it's the first good news in 6 months. Davis checked the futures board at the co-op. Spot price, $2.23. July contracts, $2.41. December contracts, $2.58. The market was pricing in recovery, slowly, cautiously, but movement. He didn't sell. Carson stopped by. You hear about the price bump? Yeah. You selling? Not yet. Why not? You're up 20 cents from November. Still down from harvest. Carson looked frustrated. You're never going to get harvest prices back. That market's gone. 223 is good. Take it. You take it. You've got grain in storage? No, I sold out in November. Then you can't take it. The realization settled between them. Carson had made his decision in November. Sold at $1.98. Got liquidity, paid his note, survived another quarter. But he'd given up optionality. He couldn't benefit from any price movement because he had nothing left to sell. Davis still had 12,000 bushels, which meant he still had leverage. The fan kept running. April, corn hit $2.37. The phone started ringing. Henderson, you still holding grain? Yeah. What are you waiting for? Better price. This is better. You're up 40 cents from the bottom. I'm still down $1 from break even. Break even doesn't matter anymore. The market doesn't care what your costs are. I know, but I can wait until it cares a little more. Henderson hung up, frustrated. He'd sold his entire crop at $2.14. Thought he was being prudent. Now he was watching prices climb while sitting on empty bins. He couldn't participate in the recovery because he had nothing left to sell. The Mitchells called. We heard you're still holding grain. That's right. Would you consider selling to us direct? We've got a contract opportunity if we can source local grain. What's the price, huh? $2.40 delivered. Elevators offering $2.37. We'll go $2.45. Davis thought about it. How much do you need? 4,000 bushels. I'll do half that at $2.50. That's above market. You called me. Market price doesn't matter if nobody has grain to sell. Silence. Then, deal. Time had changed the leverage. In October, grain was everywhere and buyers were scarce. In April, everyone who'd sold early was locked out, and the farmers who'd held had pricing power. Davis loaded 2,000 bushels, delivered to the Mitchells' place, got a check for $5,000, first sale in 6 months. Not at his break-even price, but at a premium to market because scarcity had replaced glut. The fan kept running. May, the local elevator went bankrupt. Too much debt, too little margin. They'd been buying grain at $2. Now $14 and storing it, hoping to sell at $2. $40. But the carrying costs and interest ate them. When the bank called their operating line, they couldn't cover. The auction was on a Tuesday. Equipment, bins, trucks, everything. Davis didn't go, but he heard about it. Henderson's bought some bin infrastructure. Carson's picked up a grain dryer. Miller didn't bid on anything. He was past the point where more equipment mattered. The elevator closing changed the local dynamics. Now farmers had to haul grain 30 miles to the next nearest buyer. Or sell direct, or store longer and wait for prices to recover enough that the haul cost made sense. Davis had 10,000 bushels left. The fan still running, the electricity bill still coming. But now he wasn't just holding grain. He was one of the few people in the area with grain to sell. His phone rang constantly. Feedlots looking for local supply, small operators trying to avoid long hauls. Neighbors who'd sold out in the fall and now needed to buy back for cedar feed. Price wasn't $2.37 anymore. Not for grain that didn't require a 60-mile round trip. Davis got $2.60 for a load going to a dairy operation, $2.55 for a feedlot contract, $2.70 for a seed supplier who needed exactly 1,000 bushels of clean corn. He wasn't getting rich, but he was getting more than market because he had what others didn't: inventory and patience. The fan kept running. June brought summer heat. Temperature management became critical. Davis ran the fan continuously during the hottest weeks. The electricity bill hit $71. His wife looked at it. This is eating the margin. I know. We're spending $70 a month to store grain we could just sell. We're spending $70 to maintain optionality. She didn't love the answer, but she understood it. The grain sitting in those bins wasn't just corn. It was leverage in a market where leverage was scarce. July. Corn hit $2.89. Futures were pushing $10. The Chinese delegation had turned into actual contracts. Mexican demand was steady. The Soviet Union was back in the market after a poor domestic harvest. The recovery was real, slow, but real. Davis sold another 3,000 bushels at $2.85, then waited. August. Corn touched $3.05. He sold 2,000 more at $2.98. September. The final 3,000 bushels moved at $3.12. Total revenue, $34,308 on 12,000 bushels. Average price, $2.87. The Hendersons had sold their crop at $2.14. Revenue, $25,680 on the same volume. The difference, $8,700, the cost of selling early. But it wasn't just money, it was the ability to participate in recovery. The Hendersons had locked in their loss in October. Davis had delayed his decision until the market gave him better options. He didn't celebrate, didn't brag, just shut off the fan, cleaned the bins, and prepared for next season. The electricity bill for the entire storage period, $640, worth every kilowatt. Henderson stopped by in October. Didn't need anything, just wanted to talk. You made out pretty good. Better than October prices. You knew it would recover. No, I just knew I could afford to wait and find out. Henderson nodded, understanding something expensive. I had to sell. The bank was calling notes. I didn't have a choice. I know, but you did. Different situation. Same market, different leverage. They stood looking at the bins. The fan was silent now. The grain was gone. But the infrastructure remained, ready for the next harvest, the next crisis, the next calculation of time versus price. What would you have done if prices never came back? Henderson asked. Davis thought about it. Fed it to cattle, sold it at a loss, gone back to work, same as you did just later. So you were gambling. We were all gambling. I just had enough chips to stay at the table longer. That was the truth. Not genius, not prescience, just the capacity to absorb risk because debt wasn't forcing immediate decisions. The fan had given him time. Time had given him options. Options had given him a better price. Winter came. Davis sat at the kitchen table running year-end numbers. Gross grain revenue, $34,380. Less storage costs, $647. Net, $33,733. If he'd sold in October, $25,680. The difference between panic and patience, $8,053. Enough to matter. Not enough to celebrate. Just enough to reinforce the lesson. Liquidity is safety, but leverage is time, and time is negotiating power. His wife looked at the numbers. We did okay. We survived. Better than survived. This year, next year might be different. She knew he was right. The farm crisis wasn't over. It would run for another 3 years. More foreclosures, more auctions, more farmers learning that debt removes patience, and patience requires capital, and capital requires either luck or restraint. Davis had chosen restraint when times were good. His father had chosen restraint before him. Not because they were smarter, but because they'd seen boom cycles before and knew that leverage cuts both ways. The bins sat empty through winter. In March, Davis serviced the fan, changed the bearings, greased the motor, replaced worn pulleys. When he was done, the system was ready. He didn't know what the next harvest would bring, didn't know if prices would hold or collapse again, but he knew he had storage capacity, and storage capacity meant options, and options meant he wouldn't have to make decisions on someone else's timeline. The Mitchells sold their farm that spring. Too much debt, too many bad decisions. They'd sold their grain at the bottom, missed the recovery, and couldn't service their loans. The bank took everything. Carson was still farming, but smaller. He'd sold equipment, leased back some land, scaled down to survive. He'd made it through, but barely. Miller was gone. Farms sold at auction. He'd moved to town, got a job at the co-op, still involved in agriculture, but not farming anymore. And Henderson was farming angry. Angry at the banks, angry at the market, angry at himself for selling early. The anger wouldn't change anything, but Davis understood it. Henderson had made a reasonable decision that turned out wrong, and watching someone else make a different decision that turned out right was painful. Davis didn't judge any of them. They'd all played the hands they were dealt with the chips they had. Some had more chips, some had better cards. Everyone was just trying to survive a market that didn't care about effort or intention. Spring 1985. Davis planted again. Same acres, same equipment, same approach. He learned nothing new because he'd been farming this way all along. Conservative acreage, low debt, patience with commodity sales. The farm crisis kept running, but Davis kept running too. The fan sat silent in the spring warmth, waiting for the next harvest, ready to cycle air through the next grain mass, ready to give him time when time was the only asset that mattered. He walked out to the bins one evening, checked the fan housing. Everything was in order. The system that had cost him $647 in electricity had bought him $8,050 in better prices, and more importantly, it had kept him in the game while others were forced out. That was the real victory. Not wealth, not even profit, just survival with optionality intact. Because in a collapsing market, the winners aren't the ones who guess the bottom. They're the ones who can afford to wait until the bottom becomes obvious. They sold. He turned on the fan. Time did the rest. If stories about preparation and leverage matter to you, consider this. Sometimes survival isn't about predicting the market. It's about being able to wait. The farm crisis taught an entire generation that speed of decision-making matters less than quality of position. Debt forces speed. Capital allows patience. And patience, when you can afford it, often looks like wisdom in hindsight. The difference wasn't knowledge. It was infrastructure, a fan, a bin, in the absence of a payment schedule that demanded immediate cash flow. Subscribe if you understand that the most valuable asset in a crisis isn't information. It's time.